Hello and welcome to the Kentucky Today podcast. I'm Lawrence Smith, the editor of Kentucky Today, alongside managing editor Mark Maynard, fresh from vacation. Welcome back, Mark. Tell us about your trip.
Good to be back. We spent 10 days in Florida and in Melbourne Beach mostly, where my son lives. And we saw a rocket launch at 4:30 one morning. And we went down to the beach to watch it, and it was at Cape Canaveral, and you could see it, lighting up the sky, and then you could actually hear it like four or 5 seconds later. You didn't hear it right at first. You saw it go, and you saw it fly up in the air, and then all of a sudden you heard the kaboom. But along with seeing a rocket launch at 4:30 in the morning, we saw a sea turtle come out of the ocean and to lay her eggs up on the beach. And that turtle moved pretty slow. It was big. It's almost like a dinosaur. I mean, it is just gigantic, and it is the most sea turtles are in that area more than anywhere in the else in the United States. So it's kind of cool. That's kind of their thing down there. They got turtle emblems everywhere and that kind of thing. So, but it was a great trip, and actually, the one place we stayed, I didn't have internet access, which was really good, to get unplugged for a while.
Well, that's one of my bucket list things is to see a rocket launch from Cape Canaveral. So that had to be pretty neat. And I know you also went to see the new Superman movie, which we discussed at length, but not here. That was part of the trip as well.
Really enjoyed that too. That was, Superman. Of course, I'm not the fan you are, but I am a pretty big fan of Superman. I'm from Ashland, of course, and the George Reeves that was there. He lived in Ashland for a while, so we kind of put the claim to him a little bit. I know he died in Hollywood or whatever, and big story behind that, of course. But Superman movie was good. Enjoyed it.
Of course, Metropolis, Illinois, is right near Paducah, so we're very close to that museum. All right. Good to see you again. Welcome back. We're going to start with the continuing cultural debate over transgender athletes. I sat down with Kentucky Attorney General Russell Coleman to talk about a letter he signed along with 25 other attorneys general. That letter calls on the NCAA to basically award medals, recognitions, championships that women lost to biological men. Very famous case right here in Kentucky of Riley Gaines, a former UK swimmer who lost a medal to a biological male, Leah Thomas. So I talked to Coleman about that letter and began by asking him what this letter, signed by him and 25 other attorneys general, what that letter hopes to accomplish.
Well, this letter is about common sense, and maybe I should say what this letter is not about. This letter is not about being anti anyone. It's not about meanness. It is not about being divisive. What this letter is about is joining 25 other attorneys general and asking the NCAA to apply common sense to their titles, to their championships, and that common sense is following up with what the Trump administration asked the NCAA to do, and that is to clean its books, to ensure that if a male playing a female sport, purporting themselves to be a female, if they were a champion, if they ranked above the female, it's allowing the females to actually rightfully be awarded their championships, their titles, their records. It's adjusting the books for what is common sense, that males should not be playing, competing, should not be winning or ranked over females. Again, it's not anti anything. It's simply applying the law and common sense to collegiate athletics.
Why did you think it was important for Kentucky to sign on to this?
Kentucky's uniquely important. And at the end of the day, we had 26 attorneys general. My hat is off to Lynn Fitch, the attorney general of Mississippi. The fact that we had 24 plus AGs on the letter is an example of what you and I have talked about in the past, and that is so oftentimes on these big national issues, the Kentucky Attorney General, is so oftentimes signing on to letters, litigation, collaborating with a dozen, 2 dozen other AGs. This job is much more collaborative with other states who also want to focus on common sense and doing the right thing. And so again, my hat's off to the Mississippi AG. Kentucky's important because let's just say it out loud. Riley Gaines, that we're proud of, a fellow University of Kentucky graduate, this is a validation of what she has fought for ever since that regrettable incident, where she had her own experience with a male being ranked above or equal to her in a female sport. This is important because we have the greatest rivalry in college athletics, that rivalry down I-64. It's important because our letter follows that of the Trump administration's letter from its Department of Education asking the NCAA to do the same thing. It's important because right here in Kentucky is where I won with 5 other attorneys general back last year in defeating the Biden administration's effort to permanently change that. I'm not asking your viewers, listeners to be lawyers, but those of us who are dads of daughters know about Title IX. Title IX is a longstanding federal law that protects girls, not just girls' sports, girls' opportunities in education. That's the purpose of Title IX. It is a piece of civil rights legislation. This law would have been changed if the Biden administration had been successful to change the definition of gender to gender identity. You are whatever you think you are versus how you were born, that immutable characteristic. So we won. And again, it was with 5 other attorneys general right here in Kentucky. We won all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, defeating that effort of the previous administration to change gender to gender identity. It would have not only ensured that schools allowed men the opportunity to play women's sports. Think about notions of travel teams, of locker rooms, of the fact that my daughters may have to change in a locker room with males naked in a locker room. This is not just a suggestion. It would have been the law of the land, and there would have been an enforcement mechanism. Schools would have been sued if they didn't allow men to play girls' sports. And so I'm proud of what we did right here in Kentucky in federal court in the Eastern District of Kentucky. We have a tradition here of protecting our girls. I'm a dad before I'm the attorney general, and that's all this letter is about. It's about common sense and fairness and doing the right thing under the law.
So what do you hope the impact of this letter will be?
The impact, just the 4 corners of what we asked for. This letter asked for the NCAA to clean up its books. We applaud what the NCAA has done in response to the Trump administration, and that is preventing going forward men from playing girls' sports. What we want to do is look over our shoulders, look backwards, and clean up the books. Look at those titles, those championships, those victories within the collegiate sports system where men are ranked above women. That's just not accurate. Again, it's not common sense. We want the NCAA to clean that up. We want the NCAA to do the right thing. And so that's all we ask for. And it was the same that the Trump administration has requested, for the NCAA to do the right thing in regard to our girls.
You talked about this earlier, but how did President Trump's executive orders, 2 of them regarding this issue, lay the groundwork for what you're doing now?
Let me draw a contrast between the Trump administration, where we sit now, and the previous administration. During the Biden administration, the Commonwealth had to sue to protect Title IX from erosion from the Biden administration, changing gender to gender identity. That was the previous administration. In the current administration, I sat at the White House being invited with a number of other attorneys general, with the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, talking about how we in our states could take steps to protect girls' sports, practical things in states that hadn't applied common sense. This is an administration where right out of the gate, the president signed that executive order that said very clearly, Lawrence, the policy of this government, the policy of the United States, is to recognize there are 2 genders, male and female. They are immutable biological characteristics, full stop. And it will be the policy of the administration to enforce that, to ensure that organizations like the NCAA do the right thing and prevent men from playing in girls' sports. I keep coming back to that same basic notion here of fairness, not being mean or discriminatory or disrespectful to anyone. This is not anti anything. This is pro enforcing the law, and pro protecting our girls. Yeah, full stop.
As you mentioned, the NCAA has already changed its policy, no longer allowing biological men to compete in women's sports. This letter asked them to apply this not just to competition, but also to practice. Why is that necessary?
Well, think about what goes on during practice. This is very practical notion of males and females intermingling in the locker rooms, males and females intermingling in restrooms, in training facilities. Oftentimes, as college athletes know, oftentimes it's at a time with very little modesty, and so this is also just protecting girls, protecting young ladies from having men and all that comes with what goes on in a locker room, keeping them separate. This is just forward thinking common sense, applying it to practices, applying it to championships, applying it to competitions. This is just consistency across all practices, where at the end of the day, it's protecting these girls. It is protecting exposure. And I would argue also it protects males. It prevents situations that could cause harm, it could cause challenging situations and environment where these athletes need to be focused on competition, on improvement, on strategy, not on how they're able to navigate a locker room with the opposite sex being present unclothed.
Of course, this letter does not have the force of law. You're counting on the NCAA, obviously, to do this voluntarily.
The force of law stems from the executive order signed by President Trump at the beginning of his administration. This is an outgrowth of that. We are piggybacking on a letter written by the U.S. Department of Education asking for the same thing. And what we're asking for is fairness. What we're asking for is common sense. What we're asking for is for the NCAA to just do the right thing. And I don't want to take an adversarial posture. I don't want to go down that road yet, because we saw the NCAA respond appropriately to the president's executive order earlier this year. We saw the NCAA prevent future competition between males and females. I want to take an optimistic bent and think this is a practical suggestion to help the NCAA do the right thing. And it is a fairly significant stick for the chief law enforcement officers of 26 of our states to suggest the NCAA take these steps, especially a state like Kentucky, with our very, very strong collegiate sports program that I represent and that I have a duty to protect. Lawrence?
Big picture, where do you think the trajectory is now headed in this entire transgender controversy?
My job as the Attorney General of the state is to enforce the law, to protect statutes passed by the General Assembly, to mitigate violence, to tackle our drug epidemic. The fact that we're talking about this controversy, the fact that we're spending state resources to do the right, to encourage organizations to apply common sense, is a bit of a shock to me, to be perfectly frank. It is the fact that you and I are talking about this and not how we're reducing violence in Louisville, or how we're reducing our drug overdose deaths, or how we're collaborating in law enforcement, how we're protecting our law enforcement officers, or dealing with a mental health crisis in law enforcement. That's why I ran for Attorney General. But I'll tell you this, we go to the threats. In law enforcement, we go to the threats. And as a parent, we oftentimes end the day very differently than we expected to that morning, based on what's going on with our kids. This challenge was mitigated by the Trump administration. This challenge has been mitigated by the fact that the American people caused a significant course correction. I'm able to spend my time now more focused on public safety issues, that I am suing our own government to, again, apply common sense, that men are men and women are women. And that was the litigation that, again, we won up to the Supreme Court of the United States. My hope is that I can spend much less time, you and I can spend much less time talking about this, because who would have thought just a few years ago that this would be that this would even be a conversation? So my hope is we can get back to common sense. I can get back to spending most of my time and resources being a cop and protecting Kentuckians. But it's important that we protect our girls. It's important that we protect the integrity of girls' sports, that my daughters don't have to worry about seeing men unclothed in the locker room. And so we are and will go to the threats as they present themselves. But my prediction is that this is not something that dominates our conversation going forward this year. My hope is this is the last time we have this conversation, that the NCAA does the right thing, and I can focus on the real threats that are harming, killing Kentuckians.
General Coleman, thank you. Always good to talk to you.
Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Attorney General Russell Coleman from Kentucky. Mark, I'm curious to get your kind of initial thoughts on what the Attorney General had to say.
Well, I thought what he had to say is exactly right. I mean, it's common sense. It's men and women. It shouldn't be that hard to figure out. I know, the NCAA is not going to act quickly on something like this, though. I don't think. And I don't know how much it is, how much involved it really is, how many records are going to have to change, how many of that, it would be interesting to see, to be honest, because it seems to me like the whole transgender sports thing has been more of something that's really more recently happened, recently as in a few years, of course we have, he mentioned Riley Gaines, and certainly she has been the fighter for this, since she was swimming a few years ago. And, good for her. I mean, she's been incredible as far as how she has approached this thing. I think it does say a lot that at least 26 states have said that's, that puts us over the majority anyway. And like he said, I think it more goes back to what the Trump administration wanted to do in the first place. So I can't imagine that the NCAA is going to just dismiss it, and say, we're not doing that.
But Mark, it shows you the depth of the divide, I think. 26 states, yes, but there are 24 states, almost half the states, who are not signing on to this. So that's interesting to me. It shows the cultural and moral divide in the country.
We remember that University of Pennsylvania did take Leah Thomas's awards away, and
under pressure.
And they did so not because they maybe thought it was right, but because they didn't want to lose money. I mean, let's just face facts as what that was. But they did do that, so there is that example of what can be done. Now, whether or not the NCAA does that, I don't know. It will be really interesting to see, because this does, even though it's 26, this does put a little pressure on them to say something, to do something about it, instead of just be quiet and hope it goes away. I do agree with him. I don't think transgender things in sports in particular are something we're going to be having to talk about a lot, and I think that's great if we don't have to talk about it. When I started as a journalist in 1975, that was when Title IX started. And, even as a newspaper, we understood, things are having to get equal a little bit. We're going to have to cover the girls some. We're going to have to, be part of that. And it's been great. And, you see how women's sports have evolved in the last 50 years. Amazing, really. We got some tremendous athletes. But do they measure up with all men? No, of course not. I mean, it's different. It's men and women. It's apples and oranges. It's not the same thing. And just because you claim you're a woman, that doesn't make you a woman. And that's kind of the bottom line with it with me. I think it's all silly, to be honest. I mean, I don't really understand why there's so much fight over it. I can't see the other side, I guess.
And Coleman made that point, and I think I agree with him. It is shocking that this is even a discussion. Yeah,
exactly. We talk about it a lot, just more like, are you kidding? Is this really happening? But I know it's a cultural thing. There's no doubt about that. So we'll see how this letter, if it does anything, and I hope it does. I hope it at least gets them to understand that not everybody wants this. And
well, Mark, I know you agreed. This is what happens when a culture unmoors itself from Genesis 1.
Mm-hmm.
If you get that wrong,
right.
You get a lot of things wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. It's that's exactly right. And that's what this is doing. it's saying, woman's not a woman, woman or a man's not a man, a man can also be a woman. No, they can't. It's men and women, and that's just how we believe and how we understand what the Bible says, and that's enough for me.
We'll end that there, but we'll go to something else, a big political event this weekend, and Russell Coleman will be there along with many other Republicans, but I think only one Democrat, and that's Fancy Farm. It takes place this weekend, and there's a lot of discussion going on right now about whether Fancy Farm is still relevant. It's dominated now by Republicans, used to be dominated by Democrats, but now there's a big debate over whether it's even relevant in this time of social media. Mark, have you ever covered Fancy Farm?
I have not. I mean, I have been associated with it, though, a long time. Even my time at the Independent, we had a Frankfurt reporter, and Ronnie Ellis, and he always went to Fancy Farm and reported on it. And it's of course, it's an interesting event. There's no doubt, and it's interesting too to me that the people who are saying it's not important pretty much are the Democrats who are saying it's not relevant anymore. We don't need to do this. It's nothing but people shouting barbs at each other, and really is that that's not what the culture is now. But if they had the majority of the people there, it might be different. And maybe the Republicans would say it's not relevant if that were the case. But and this year is really interesting, I think, in that we don't even have an election in November. We're still a year away from all that.
Yeah, the focus will be on next year's Senate race with
yes, exactly.
Senator McConnell retiring.
It will be, and that will be huge. And you know what, Lawrence, they're already advertising. And we're talking more than a year and a half out, and they're already advertising. And there's going to be, there'll probably be a record for the amount of money that is spent on that campaign on trying to win that seat that Mitch McConnell's stepping down from. So, is it relevant? Well, I think it's relevant. I mean, I think if we have enough people down there to speak and to talk politics, and I think let's do it. Let's go down and see what it's all about. So to say it's irrelevant now, and like I said, I think it's mostly Democrats who are saying that. I don't think that's exactly right.
Yeah, I think it is a unique event, and I've covered several of them, probably more than a dozen of them. And it is an interesting event. It puts candidates on the spot. They have to say their piece in the face of opposition, literally yelling at them from the crowd. And it shows you what a candidate's made of. So I do think it's still relevant. It's always important, despite social media, despite television, to get candidates in front of the people. And that's what this does.
And you're right. This puts the pressure on them a little bit. I mean, you got people booing you and yelling at you and asking questions even, of you. And, how do you react? And I think some of the Democrats are afraid of what might happen there. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. I guess only one going right now, right?
One Democrat who was challenging for a congressional seat, challenging Jamie Comer, Congressman Jamie Comer. His Democratic challenger is going to be the only Democrat announced so far to be there. So it's going to be interesting. And I think it's still relevant, and I hope it does not die, because I think it's an event that does very good for Kentucky politics.
Yeah, it puts us in the headlines, and not in a bad way, I don't think. I mean, I know a lot of them, they joke and they carry on and they say things they wouldn't say probably other places, to be honest, but I think it is relevant, and I think it's important that they get put on the spot and that they, have to answer for whatever it is, for whatever people are talking about. So, it should be a hot Saturday afternoon in Fancy Farm.
In more ways than one.
Yeah, and from what I hear, that food is fantastic.
It is. I can vouch for that. And they say that you can't necessarily win a race at Fancy Farm, but you can lose one. And I've seen it happen a couple of times that comments made at Fancy Farm ultimately cost a candidate support. So we'll see what happens this weekend.
All right. It'll be fun.
Shifting gears to a more fruitful, perhaps, or a more worshipful, anyway, camp. And this is the student worship camp. We had a number of pieces on Kentucky Today this past week, a video story as well as 2 other stories about students gathering from 4 states, at least 4 states, and 9 states, 44 churches.
Yeah.
To gather to learn how to lead worship and to do the technical aspects of worship, audio boards, things like that. But more than that, it's more than just technical and artistry, but it's also focused on spiritual growth. That worship is more than is not just performance; it is worshiping the Lord. So I wholeheartedly endorse anybody who has a student that's interested in that sort of thing, because the church needs up-and-coming leaders in the area of worship and the technical area.
Lawrence, the fruit that has already come from that is incredible. Some churches are using these kids after they've learned some things, and they're putting that to use. They're leading their congregations in music, and in a worshipful, in the right worshipful way too. They're being trained. They're being trained correctly, and it's been amazing to watch the growth of that over the last, I think 3 years.
This is the 4th year for it. Yeah.
Yeah, 4th year. Yeah, it's been amazing to watch the growth of that, and every year it's bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know where they're going to have to hold it to hold everybody, or maybe expand it another week, but it's great to see that. I think there's a lot of part-time music worship leaders in Kentucky, just like there's a lot of bivocational pastors. We don't have all our churches in Kentucky aren't huge churches that maybe can't afford to pay somebody to lead the music or whatever. But just like we have pastors in the pews, waiting to do that, I think we have music people there as well, and I think this proves it. We're seeing it. It's so great to see the young kids too, though, isn't it? To see them worshiping and learning at the same time. So I'm with you. Kudos to everybody that's been involved with that. I know Bubba Stewart's been, instrumental in that, and a lot of others too. And I thought the coverage was great. I read all those stories. They're really good pieces. You got the worship leaders and even some of the participants who were talking about, what a great experience it was. And I'm sure that was the case.
We're going to end with a story that you wrote just a day or so ago, and it sounds trivial at first till you get into the details, but that is what Main Street Baptist Church in Lexington has been going through, trying to get a parking lot back. Talk about that story.
Yeah, it's a church in downtown Lexington, first off, and anybody that's been to a basketball game at Rupp Arena, or even to shop or do anything in downtown Lexington, it's tough to find a parking place. You cannot get, you can't get close to that arena hardly, and you still have to pay $25 or whatever to park. So parking's at a premium anyway. And this church, which has 350 members, we're not talking about a little church. That's a big church, and a big church needs a lot of places for a lot of cars to park. And, basically 6 years ago, downtown Lexington was going through some changes, and like every downtown in America, right? I mean, downtowns are struggling. They're doing some things. They're doing some construction. They're putting a park in, and when they did that, the one that was probably affected the most was Main Street Baptist, and they were left with only about 20 parking spaces. That was all they had to deal with, and 350 people. 20 parking places, you can do that. I'm no math genius.
That does not add up.
That does not work. So they've been fighting the city. We need parking. You can't take all our parking. And they've been persevering, Lawrence, over this for 6 years. They have played it out in the media, both sides, over that time. And it was interesting when I was talking to the pastor, Pastor Victor Scholler, and he said, we both decided we wouldn't negotiate in the media, and that's how they really kind of got the ball rolling. And they got this administrator, city administrator, Sally Hamilton. They sat down with her, talked to her. They talked to Mayor Gordon, who wasn't the mayor when everything happened. And, they talked to a couple other people, a city councilman with that. They got together, calmly discussed it, nobody was jumping up and down on the tables, for either side. And they worked it out. And basically, they're going to get a parking lot for 95 cars. And on Sundays, they're giving them the garage for free. And that can hold up to 220 cars. Now, that's great. That seemed like that would take care of everything, except like if you have a special event, if you have a funeral, if you have a wedding, even maybe, you might need more. Yeah. If it's through the week, you don't have that 220 parking there. But I still think it was a little bit of a compromise, I guess. But I still think it was a victory for Main Street Baptist, and a victory for how they handled it too over the 6 years. And they did it in a very Christ-like way. They weren't happy, and they didn't just throw their hands up and give up, though. They fought for what was there. That church has been there 163 years, so they had something to fight for. I think they had some legacy, built into what they were dealing with. So I thought it was it was a good story, and a great victory for Main Street Baptist and for Lexington, the city too, because they came up and they did the right thing. They gave them back some parking spaces that they dearly needed.
Congratulations to Main Street Baptist Church. Glad that has finally been resolved.
Yeah.
Well, for more on that story, other stories, go to KentuckyToday.com. And while you're there, sign up for the morning briefing, which is our daily email digest. And for more on the Kentucky Baptist Convention and the cooperative program that makes this program possible, go to kybaptist.org. Lord willing, we'll see you next time on the Kentucky Today podcast.